Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one.
The introduction. Quiet hum of the nearby streetlights buzzed in the stillness of mid-November. In the small suburban community of Maplewood, nestled just outside of the city, the evening air carried a chill that hinted at the approaching winter. Families tucked themselves away in their warm homes, blissfully unaware of the sinister events that would soon unfurl in their midst. On the outskirts of this quaint neighborhood stood an aging two-story house. Its paint was peeling, and the front yard, once vibrant and full of life, now lay overgrown and wild. To the untrained eye, it looked like any other neglected residence, but its history held the secrets that would soon draw the attention of law enforcement, media, and the unsettling days of a nation. Inside, a sense of despair hung heavy in the air. Sarah Mitchell, a local schoolteacher in her late 30s, had always been the heart of her community, well-liked, dedicated, and deeply involved in his students' lives. But on that fateful Tuesday evening, she had not returned home. Her students noticed her absence. Messages went unanswered and panic began to set in when she failed to arrive for her Wednesday morning classes. As the sun dipped below the horizon, families began to share worried whispers. One neighbor, Tom, had seen Sarah last, her familiar silhouette moving down the street. That time was pinned in his memory, a stark contrast to the anxiety swirling in the community now. It had been a simple wave, but now it felt haunting, echoing an unsettling sense of foreboding. Hours passed, and law enforcement received their first call, a frantic report of a missing person. They would arrive early the next morning, unprepared for what they would ultimately uncover, setting the stage for a deep dive into darkness. Little did they know the seemingly peaceful life in Maplewood was teetering on the edge, and Sarah's disappearance would unravel secrets that hid in plain sight. The victim, Sarah Mitchell, was a woman who embodied warmth and kindness. She taught 4th grade at Maplewood Elementary, a position she cherished. Her laughter, infectious as it was, had a way of lighting up even the dullest of school days. Colleagues often remarked on her dedication, noting how she went out of her way to connect with her students, organizing after-school tutoring sessions, and ensuring that no child felt left behind. But beneath that caring exterior lay unspoken struggles, doubts, and a shadow of solitude that few truly understood. For years, Sarah had been navigating the storms of her personal life. Her marriage to Mark had frayed at the edge. Once a lively partnership, their relationship had deteriorated into an era of quiet discontent, conversations dwindling to disagreements over petty matters. Mark, a mechanic whose world revolved around his workshop, often found solace in the grease-stained tools and machines instead of the home they had built together. In the weeks leading up to her disappearance, Sarah had confided in her closest friend, Lisa. They met weekly for coffee, a sacred tradition that had held fast through the years. "I just feel so alone," Sarah had said, her voice a fragile whisper amidst the clinking cups. "I want to feel like I matter again." Those words echoed in Lisa's mind, a haunting reminder of how acutely Sarah felt her isolation. At the school, Sarah had been the go-to person for many, the rock on which students leaned. She had a remarkable ability to transcend her own issues and focus on others. That Tuesday, she had arrived early to set up for an after-school tutoring session, a commitment she made unflinchingly. Yet, by lunchtime, cracks in the facade began to show. A colleague noted her distracted demeanor, the way she stared blankly out the window instead of engaging in the usual banter in the staff room. As the day wore on, an overwhelming sense of dread lay in wait. Those who knew her could feel something shift, invisible but profound, as if the air thickened with unspoken fears. No one could know it then, but Sarah was teetering on the brink of an abyss, and what would follow would forever alter the fabric of their lives in Maplewood. The crime scene. When police lights illuminated the otherwise darkened street of Maplewood, the small community stirred from its slumber. Officers swarmed the area, questioning neighbors, while setting up a perimeter around Sarah's home. The air was thick with anticipation and fear, as the local police began piecing together fragments of the previous night's events, their breaths visible in the crisp morning air. The rhythmic sound of boots crunching on gravel filled the silence as Officer Daniels approached the front door of the Mitchell residence. The door, slightly ajar, creaked ominously on its hinges. Steeling himself, he pushed it open wider. Scent of stale air rushing out to greet him. Inside, the house bore not just the mark of neglect, but an eerie stillness that was profoundly unsettled. The living room, adorned with faded photographs of Sarah and Mark, felt like a stage set frozen in time. A framed picture caught Daniel's eye. Sarah smiled brightly, cradling a bouquet of flowers, a testament to happier time. But the scene was anything but joyful now. As he ventured deeper into the dim corridors, the sense of foreboding hung heavier, and the dust accumulating on surfaces. A terse voice crackled through his radio, confirming the backyard access. Nodding, Daniels moved cautiously, each footstep echoing in the silence. Outside, the overgrown grass whispered secrets. Beads choked the flower beds. Zingling in the air. The backyard led to a dilapidated shed, its door hanging limply on rusted hinges. Inside, the contents lay disheveled, a mix of gardening tools, bicycles, and the hollow remains of forgotten childhood dreams. But as Daniels rifled deeper, he stumbled upon something that made his heart pound. Hidden beneath an old tarp, he found items that did not belong there. A blood-stained piece of fabric and a small silver locket, tarnished but recognizable. The fabric was unmistakably part of Sarah's clothing, the locket engraved with her initial. A shiver ran down Daniel's spine. The implications twisted in his mind. With each discovery, they nestled deeper into a growing sense of dread. It was becoming painfully clear that Sarah's absence was not a mere case of miscommunication or forgetfulness. It was now a palpable, terrifying reality. As detectives continued their investigation, they began to build a narrative shrouded in fear. Each nod to the evidence echoed in the unsettled hearts of Maplewood's residents. A community once marked by the simplicity of suburban life was now shrouded in darkness. In the comfort of their homes, behind closed doors, whispers spread like wildfire. Was there a predator among them? The early investigation. As the sun rose higher over Maplewood, casting a harsh glare on the crime scene, the atmosphere was charged with tension. Investigators from the local police department, bolstered by detectives with more extensive experience, descended upon the scene with purposeful intent. They were aware that the first few hours following a disappearance often held the key to unraveling the mystery. Time was of the essence. Detective Julia Ramirez, a seasoned investigator known for her sharp intuition, was among the first to arrive at the scene. "We need to canvass the neighborhood," she instructed her team as they set about their duties. Each officer approached their task with urgency, knocking on doors, seeking insight from residents who might have seen or heard anything unusual on the night Sarah vanished. "It's critical we talk to the last person who saw her," Ramirez said, her voice steady yet laced with urgency. As they honed in on the timeline, Tom, the neighbor who had witnessed Sarah's last known movements, emerged as a key figure. He recounted a seemingly mundane exchange, mentioning that she had appeared distracted that evening, walking briskly and glancing at her watch repeatedly. It was like she was in a hurry, he recalled, fidgeting with his hands. The neighbors assembled in clusters, murmurs rising as fear gripped the community deeper. They were eager to share tidbits of information, yet most had little of substance. The mundane details, children playing, lawn mowers buzzing, whirled within the tension. The detectives listed the names in details, compiling a web of connections they hoped would lead them closer to Sarah. Meanwhile, the forensic team meticulously processed the house and the shed, their white suits stark against the drab colors of the exterior. The fabric found in the shed was sent to the lab for analysis, while officers collected additional items for fingerprinting, hoping to identify any unknown presence that may have crossed the threshold of Sarah's. In the midst of the commotion, Ramirez received a call from crime scene analysis. The blood stain on the fabric had been confirmed as human, igniting a sense of urgency that propelled the investigation forward with renewed vigor. Each piece of evidence added weight to the belief that this was no simple case of a woman walking away from her life. It was dark, it was complicated, and it was unraveling in layers. As the day transitioned into evening, the police decided to hold a press conference. In front of the gathered crowd, Ramirez projected a calm demeanor while her heart raced beneath the surface. "We are doing everything in our power to locate Sarah Mitchell," she asserted, eyes scanning the anxious faces in the audience. Hope mingled with fear, and questions hung heavy in the air. What had truly happened to their beloved teacher? The search was only just beginning, and the stakes had never been higher. The dead ends. Days turned into a tense week as the investigation into Sarah Mitchell's disappearance progressed. Yet every lead seemed to dwindle into disappointment. Detective Ramirez and her team meticulously combed through the evidence, piecing together timelines and potential motives. But with each passing hour, the resolve among investigators hung on a delicate thread. Although fear had rippled through the community, their efforts often felt like grasping at shadows. The forensic report arrived, confirming that the blood on the fabric belonged to Sarah. The stark reality of it sent shivers down Ramirez's spine. A life had been stifled, and all they could cling to were unanswered questions. They followed leads that went nowhere. Security footage from a gas station nearby confirmed that Sarah had not been there. Friends offered alibis, and neighbors' accounts failed to provide insight beyond the obvious. As investigative whispers turned to murmurs of annoyance, Ramirez shifted her focus to digital footprints. Phone records, social media, and GPS data all came under scrutiny to unearth anything that might indicate contact with a person of interest, or any sign of distress she might have expressed before her disappearance. Yet the digital trail remained barren, offering no clues, only reinforced doubts. Following a hunch, the team turned to Mark Mitchell for questioning. However, he provided a narrative laced with genuine concern, detailing their strained home life, the silent dinners, and how they had drifted apart. While his demeanor seemed sincere, Ramirez noted the way his gaze shifted during critical moments, tiny flickers that told a different story. One asked about their last interaction. He grew defensive. His words clipped. "I didn't know she was in that much distress," he stated, the edges of his frustration seeping through. Despite the continuous investigation, Ramirez pondered over the various places Sarah frequented. She spoke to fellow teachers, personal friends, even parents of students, in hopes of finding someone who had recently crossed paths with Sarah, someone who might have noticed a shift in her demeanor. But every trail, be it the local coffee shop or gym, where she sometimes worked out, returned the same monotonous response: Sarah seemed fine. As night descended, tinting the suburban landscape in shadows, the detectives gathered to strategize in their cramped office space. Pinpoints of frustration appeared around the table. They were losing momentum. "We need a break in the case. Something to pull us from this spiral," Ramirez admitted, the weight of the unsolved hovering heavily above their heads. The urgency in her voice echoed as it mingled with the uncertainty. Each passing day brought only silence. With more questions than answers, the team was left grappling in the dark, desperately hoping that someone would come forward with the critical fragment they needed, in a case spiraling farther into a void. The community's spirit flickered. Maplewood's surface of tranquility now marred by anxiety. Lurking beneath the veneer of day-to-day life was an unsettling apprehension. They were united in their search, but divided by fear, caught in a web of speculation that wove unexpectedly tightly around them all. A break in the case. In the early hours of the following Monday, a crackling radio call broke the uneasy silence enveloping the Maplewood Police Department. The sound sliced through the tension lingering like fog in the air. It was news that would shift the direction of the investigation. Detective Ramirez, bleary-eyed yet alert, listened intently as the dispatcher relayed the detail. A couple had discovered items that might belong to Sarah, discarded on the outskirts of town, near an abandoned warehouse. The team mobilized quickly, adrenaline fueling their movements. They gathered equipment and hastily set out to the location, the prospect of a lead igniting hope once more. As they arrived at the desolate warehouse, a sense of urgency enveloped them. The looming walls of the structure appeared foreboding against the pale morning light. Within moments, they were led by the couple, visibly shaken, toward the discarded items. Strewn across the ground were personal belongings: a torn backpack, remnants of notebooks, and a scarf that matched the one Sarah had been wearing the day she vanished. The sight of these familiar objects created a palpable tension, leaving investigators to grapple with the weight of potential heartbreak yet again. As the forensic team began collecting evidence and documenting the scene, Ramirez rifled through the scattered items with a sense of frantic determination. The presence of Sarah's belongings outside of the community felt like a betrayal of familiarity. It was a stark reminder that danger had crept in unnoticed. They gathered DNA samples, hoping they would yield results more definitive than the void they had faced. The atmosphere shifted dramatically as they expanded the perimeter and began searching the grounds. Moments later, a shout emanated from a nearby corner. An officer, eyes wide with shock, stood over a shallow pit, concealed beneath a layer of debris. Ramirez joined him, heart pounding in her chest. The unearthed area felt heavy with unspoken dread as they peered into its depths. There, partially obscured, was an object, glinting in the dirty light, an empty ring box. Nestled inside, however, was something much more unsettling. A worn, cracked phone. Ramirez knelt to retrieve it, her gloved fingers trembling as she turned the device over, revealing its shattered screen. The immediate thought was why someone would discard it here. Did it belong to Sarah? If so, what secrets lay hidden within? With newfound resolve, the forensic computer analyst was called to the scene, called to determine if they could retrieve any data from the phone. As they began their work, the mood among the officers shifted from despair to cautious optimism that evidence could change everything, empower the investigation, and lead them closer to unraveling the mystery that had haunted Maplewood for too long. Just as they awaited preliminary results from the lab, a flurry of alerts rang through their phones. The recovered phone had pinged nearby. The realization gripped Ramirez's heart. They may be on the cusp of uncovering a path that could lead to Sarah. With each pulse of the reality, uncertainty loomed on one side, while the flicker of hope ignited a fire in their soul. They were closer than they had ever been. A break in the case had finally emerged, and this time, it could bear the weight of salvation. The suspect. The following days saw the investigation take a sharp turn as the recovered phone yielded alarming results. Evidence uncovered from its memory unveiled text messages exchanged with an unknown number, one that had not yet been connected to Sarah in the minds of investigators. The conversations were sporadic, filled with cryptic remarks and hints of a growing intensity. Reading through them, Detective Ramirez felt her pulse quicken. There was an unease nestled within those digital exchanges that became increasingly difficult to ignore. As the forensic analyst pieced together the threads of these interactions, a name emerged from the murky depths of the messages: Ethan Blake, a local handyman known for his erratic behavior and occasional run-ins with law enforcement. Blake had recently been spotted around the neighborhood surrounding Maplewood. The detectives dug deeper, combing through records to create a profile for him, looking for any motive, connection, or previous interactions he may have had with Sarah. Witnesses began to surface. Neighbors recalled seeing him loitering near the Mitchells' home during the initial days of Sarah's disappearance, although some had dismissed it as harmless curiosity. Now it felt even more troubling were mentions of Blake's obsession with the local community, where whispers of his inappropriate comments toward women surfaced. With this newfound information, Ramirez and her team wasted no time in locating Ethan Blake. They approached his home cautiously, aware of the risks posed by unpredictable individuals. As they stood outside a run-down single-story house with peeling paint and unkempt grass, a sense of unease settled over them. They exchanged glances before knocking on the door. Blake answered, his demeanor unsteady, eyes darting with a nervous energy. The officers engaged him with calculated questions, observing every twitch. When asked about his whereabouts the night Sarah went missing, he stumbled over his words, and frustration clawed at Ramirez's insides. Did he crack under pressure, or was he simply a man entangled in a web of coincidence? As the interrogation unfolded, Ramirez noted his body language shift when the topic turned to Sarah. He seemed torn between denial and evasion, an unsettling mix of anxiety, coupled with flashes of fury, summoned by the thought of being accused. I didn't do anything to her. I don't know where she is, he shouted, fists clenched tightly at his sides. The detectives pressed on, revealing the text messages they had uncovered, alluding to a connection he had worked to conceal. Blake's face paled as they read the exchanges aloud. Panic coursed through him. On one hand, it was possible the messages could be misinterpreted harmless notes that turned sinister through a different lens, but on the other, it laid the foundation for guilt that loomed in the air like an approaching storm. When the questioning ended and Blake was let go, the detectives emerged into the hallway, weary but fueled by determination. There was a flicker of resolve among them, a growing conviction that they were nearing the truth. The fear of the unknown tightened its grip on Maplewood. If Blake had been involved with Sarah, the community would bear the burden of his shadow. But before they could reach any conclusions, they understood that they needed more evidence, deeper connections, and perhaps a closer look into Blake's interactions on the fringes of their once serene tough. With the investigation illuminating darkness, every detail felt like a vital piece of the puzzle yet to be revealed. The trial, weeks turned into months, the once quiet streets of Maplewood now a backdrop for anxiety and scrutiny, as the trial of Ethan Blake loomed on the horizon. The air crackled with an electric energy, a mix of anticipation and dread palpable among residents who had become unwitting spectators in a gruesome unfolding drama. Sarah Mitchell's absence was now a haunting specter that loomed over the proceedings, and her family and friends gathered in the courtroom, struggling with the pain of loss as they sought justice. Detective Ramirez took his seat in the courtroom, the weight of the months of relentless investigation pressing down on his shoulders. The evidence had been meticulously assembled: text messages hinting at a dangerous obsession, the items found near the warehouse, and forensic reports. As the case was laid bare before the judge, the expectation for a resolution intensified. The prosecution framed Blake as a man zealous in his infatuation with Sarah, someone who had slipped into the role of a predator. Witnesses would recount his unsettling behavior and the undeniable connection forged through a series of reckless choices. The courtroom, quiet save for the rustle of papers and the rhythmic tapping of gavel strikes, transformed into a crucible of emotions. In stark contrast, Blake's defense team sought to dismantle the prosecution's narrative, painting him as a misunderstood individual falsely accused of a heinous crime. They conjured narratives of circumstance and coincidence that would pull Blake's reputation as a harmless neighbor into the light. They argued loudly and fervently that the texts could be misconstrued, and that coincidental sightings did not equate to a conviction in the eyes of the law. For Ramirez, witnessing the trial unfold brought both frustration and determination. Each day stripped to bare the emotional layers embedded in the Casas-era's vibrant personality. Her cease of laughter and the reality of her absence clawed painfully at the edges of memory. Families and friends exchanged quiet glances, expressing their anguish over her plight and the precarious balance of justice. During the trial, the testimony of Sarah's loved ones took center stage. Lisa, her closest friend, choked on her words as she spoke of Sarah's warmth and struggles. She just wanted to feel safe and loved, she said, glancing toward the jury, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She had so much to offer the world, and she deserved better. As each witness spoke, the jury leaned forward, captivated by the emotional gravity of the testimonies. Yet the defense fought back, urging the jurors to maintain a skeptical eye, to temper emotion with reason. Blake's history of being labeled a troublemaker became a focal point, the defense positing that yes, he had issues, but none had branded him as a murderer. The jury wrestled with the dichotomies laid before. Finally, the closing arguments drew near. The atmosphere in the courtroom thickened, anticipation building to a near boiling point. Ramirez sensed a shift. Everything had been meticulously laid out, and there was a growing urgency to seek justice, not just for Sarah, but for the community reeling in the aftermath. Will they find Blake guilty or innocent? The jury vanished into their deliberation room, and the wait began, a wait unsettling, edged with a tug-of-war between hope and despair. Every clock tick echoed in the hollow silence, a countdown toward that fated verdict, which would either shed light on the mystery of Sarah's fate or plunge Maplewood further into the depths of darkness, leaving an unspeakable void. Or now, the dream of closure hung in suspense, the weight of its significance palpable in the air. The aftermath. The verdict arrived on a dreary Wednesday morning. The skies heavy with clouds mirroring the tension coursing through the Maplewood courtroom. Detective Ramirez stood amongst a sea of trembling hearts and anxious eyes, the atmosphere thick with emotion as the gavel struck, ready to announce the fate of Ethan Blake. Every person present was aware that this moment would not just define the outcome of a trial, but also influence the future of a community still reeling from the void left by Sarah Mitchell. As the jury filed in, heads turned, breaths held. The foreperson, a woman with weariness carved into her features, glanced around the room before speaking. The jury find the defendant, Ethan Blake, guilty of the charge of second-degree murder. Pause lingered after the words, the weight of them hanging in the air like a shroud before a collective gasp erupted relief. Anguish, grief, disbelief. Ramirez felt a rush of conflicting emotions coursing through her veins. A small victory lay within the outcome, yet the ache of loss remained. Despite this judgment, Sarah would never return. Families embraced and tears flowed freely, a mixture of celebration for justice met with sorrow that could not be quelled. On the other side of the courtroom, Blake's reaction was almost haunting, a lingering confusion and rage woven into his features, evident that denial would continue to consume him. In the weeks that followed, the community held a vigil for Sarah, candles flickering against the encroaching darkness, a beacon of the love and kindness she had shared in life. Friends, students, and families gathered, honoring her memory, while also acknowledging the painful lesson they had learned about the shadows that can hide in plain sight. Stories of Sarah's warmth filled the air, laughter mingling with tears as they embraced each other, tethered together by their shared loss. Despite the closure the verdict brought, whispers of unease hovered over Maplewood, a stark reminder that the peace they had cherished had been irrevocably altered. The neighborhood shifted, and fear marked the edges of their interactions. Parents shielded their children a little closer, glancing warily at strangers and the never-ending cycle of uncertainty. Detective Ramirez, while feeling a sense of accomplishment in securing a conviction, wrestled with a heavy heart. Mark Mitchell, though grieving, had been remarkably resilient in the aftermath. They spoke privately in the days following the trial, and he expressed his deep gratitude for the diligence and care shown in the investigation. "Thank you for not letting her be forgotten," he whispered, voice breaking beneath the weight of his grief. Their meeting became a small but essential moment of connection, a reminder that moments of darkness, while painful, could be met with shared humanity. As life began to find some semblance of normalcy, Ramirez found himself often reflecting on the impact of the tragedy, considering how fleeting life can be, how precious every moment is. For the residents of Maplewood, the case would remain a scar of visceral reminder of vulnerability, and a collective resolve to foster an environment of awareness against lurking dangers. In the months that followed, the town came together, creating a foundation in Sarah's honor aimed at raising awareness of personal safety and support for families in crisis. Through the grief, A spark of hope emerged, a determination to ensure Sarah's legacy endured, that even amidst darkness, light could break through in unexpected places. For all the souls lost to violence, Maplewood would not forget, and together, they would strive to build a future rooted in resilience and compassion, honoring the memory of a beloved teacher, friend, and neighbor who had touched their lives so deeply. Reflection. Months slipped through the fingers of Maplewood like sand, and with each new season came the persistent reminders of a community forever changed by law. Detective Ramirez often found herself returning to the neighborhood, observing the subtle shifts as life began knitting itself back together, albeit with jagged seams. Time, it seemed, had a curious way of both healing and haunting, leaving behind scars that people learned to navigate rather than erase. The foundation established in Sarah's honor thrived slowly but steadily, igniting community awareness about safety and vigilance among residents. Workshops were organized in schools, teaching young ones how to recognize situations of risk and empowering them to seek help when uncertain. Parents began discussing safety openly, transforming fear into proactive measures. Ramirez attended several of these sessions, each one a poignant reminder of the innocence once shattered, now transforming into a collective call for vigilance, a poignant, hardening way to reclaim control over a shared destiny.